So here we go with another Cinewhoop. This is the Eachine Cvatar, in case I'm pronouncing this correctly. Cvatar 120 Cinewhoop. It's a 3-inch Cinewhoop with 1404 motors, and I have been getting Cinewhoops of all shapes and colors and sizes as of late. And to be honest, I still do not understand why anyone would voluntarily fly these, or more, let's say, I more struggle to understand why these are so popular and why our industry is pushing these so much. Because for me, these really are something of a niche application that very few people might be interested for videography reasons. And I really do not understand why anyone would want to fly one of these things for fun, because they are just not fun to fly. This one is unfortunately no exception. Although I think I don't want to keep on rambling about how I don't like Cinewhoops. So let's put this aside maybe, because this basically flies like all the other Cinewhoops. Let's put this aside and let's focus first on this specific Eachine product here, because I think there is something interesting to it, because quite obviously you can tell that Eachine has made a pretty big leap in terms of product quality. Looking at this quad here, there are a few things that really look quite different compared to other Eachine products I have seen in the past. So let's take a closer look at the frame, the motors, and the electronics. Right, so first thing I noticed is, in general, the overall quality perception of this is much better than most Eachine products I saw before. And most notably, I think, there are only, Eachine isn't making these products themselves, and there's only quite a few suppliers in the industry making these components, and also few suppliers sort of assembling these BNF drones. And obviously, either they changed supplier or they paid an extra price, but I have to say I recognize some of the elements of the packaging and so on, and obviously they are going with one of the more high-end suppliers here. It's also a bit more expensive. The thing is $150 roundabout, which is expensive for an Eachine product. But you can see they stepped up the overall quality here quite. If we look closer at what this means, first of all, the frame. As you can see, this is a hybrid construction. It's part molded plastic, part carbon fiber. So carbon fiber plates on top and bottom, and then we have these molded ducts here. This thing does come with an extra duct, which is quite nice. As you can see, this is not 3D printed. This is actual molded plastic, so that means they went through the investment of making an actual mold, which is really not cheap, but of course it's much better. The plastic, this seems to be basic ABS, so there are also different sort of grades of material quality you can do with injection molding. The highest grade is what you would find in expensive power tools, for example, which would be reinforced with usually glass fiber. This is expensive because the glass fiber over time is eroding and damaging your mold, so your mold doesn't last as long, but it makes the parts more rigid and overall more robust. This is not glass fiber reinforced, so yes, it's molded plastic, but it's sort of on the cheaper end of what you can do with molded plastic. So I would suspect, although I cannot tell, that this is just regular ABS, and obviously it is not fiber reinforced. That you can tell quite easily by just scratching the plastic a little bit. This usually you will immediately notice if it's fiber reinforced, and this one is not. It's got these, on top of that, it's got these foam bits here. These are actually quite nicely made. So overall, I would say this is quite convincing manufacturing quality here. The carbon too, I would say nothing fancy. It's not chamfered or anything, but still quite decent quality and quite decent machining here. What I especially noticed are the 3D printed parts. So these have made a pretty big jump in quality. As you can see, this is really nice print quality. On many, especially very cheap products, you see they cut a few corners by printing all you know, all the 3D printed parts at settings that make them look just horrible, and this is really not the case here. This is really very, very solid. Let me just zoom in on this. This is very solid 3D print quality here. It does also come with this aluminum sort of screw handle here to put a GoPro on there. It doesn't come with this mount, this is mine, but does come with an aluminum part here, which is also quite nice. So overall, I would say the frame is quite good quality. Now, you can maybe question whether it's a good idea to just mount the motors here on these thin piece of plastic. It's also quite flexy. Probably doesn't help with tuning. I wouldn't think that this is very stiff, but it seems to work, and I have a carbon plate here securing it, so overall seems stiff enough. I would say this really isn't a bad frame construction overall, and especially if you like colorful stuff. I mean, I think this looks quite nice. The turquoise here, this thing overall looks much nicer and much more interesting than many previous Eachine products. So another thing that I noticed is the motors here. Obviously a very, very different thing than previously seen on most Eachine products. Try to get these in focus properly. So you can see here, this is a 1404. This is not the same 1404 that is on the Shadow Fiend. This one, I have to say, looks even better. And by the looks of it, I would say probably, although obviously I cannot be 100% sure, probably this is made by RCN Power. I think this is quite characteristics of them, these multicolor anodizations here with the blue and the black. It's not easy to do, and this is sort of typical for RCN Power. Also, if we flip this around, that is going to be difficult to see, but oh, come on. You can see here there is this sort of metal lip here, this ring securing the magnets that is shining here. If I flip this, you can sort of tell. This is also quite typical for RCN Power motors, and this also means that Eachine here did put more money on the table, because usually RCN Power is like 50% more expensive than the other motor manufacturers. So I would say obviously Eachine is trying to move into more. Okay, now I'm taking the whole thing apart so we can take a look at the electronics here. Because also here, now the VTX, let's say this is the latest generation of the Eachine Nano. This one doesn't look bad, but the Eachine VTXs, especially the Nano, have been quite decent also in the past, so not too much has changed here. But this one will offer you more mounting options. It's a 400 milliwatt VTX, just like the previous generation. UFL connector, and what you can tell, compared to the previous Eachine products, this is much nicer here. The soldering does look way more, they put way more care into soldering. Also on this board here, and on the board, looking at the board, you can tell this also just looks different than the previous Eachine electronics, which were kind of weird boards, which all sorts of, they always had connectors everywhere. They would just look really cheap. Soldering looked cheap. This here looks, well, it sort of reminds me of the Gap RC board, but it's not the exact same thing. So all in one here is 6S capable, 25 amps, so more than enough for this type of quad. The camera here, this is, I think this is just a Runcam Nano 2, yeah. That's quite a cheap camera, but for the purpose of this quad it should be okay. But this is not going to give you the best FPV experience. So I think this is the only thing that if I would go for this quad, this is basically the only thing I would sort of immediately upgrade here. Because, I mean, it's got space for a larger camera. So this is something you could improve on. But overall, I have to say, Eachine did really catch up with the other manufacturers in terms of quality. and unfortunately also in price. So this thing isn't considerably cheaper than products the competitors of Eachine are. So now, after saying quite a lot of positive things about this product, let's go back to me complaining about how Cinewhoops perform, because I mean, I tested this thing on an 850 4S, and yes, it was extremely cold that day, but I tested a 5-inch toothpick on the same pack at similar temperatures, so I basically know how this behaves in comparison. And it was just awful. It was just super awful. I had this horrible feeling that I have with all Cinewhoops that as soon as I take off, my battery is just sagging and it pulls so much amps just to keep this thing hovering. And really, this is no exception here. I would say this is even among the worst that I've tried with, maybe because it's got 3-inch props, quite aggressive 3-inch props. So these 5-blade props on 1404s seems to make things even worse. So this thing is just the pinnacle of all of these Cinewhoop flight characteristics that I really do not like. The battery sag, the short flight times, this awkward lack of predictability in flight characteristics. So yeah, really not for me, but I don't know. I guess I've made that point often enough. And really, Cinewhoops are something for people who need to make specific kinds of videos, especially indoors, very close to people. But for me, these really are a very small percentage of users, and I don't think Cinewhoops are something that we will see as much in the future, because I think people more and more are starting to realize that flight performance just isn't where it should be for enjoying flying, neither regarding handling or flight times. So, I mean, you can compromise on one of them, but not on both. So, MicroLongRange, for example, compromises on flight performance. So, it's not as powerful, it's not as fast as other quads, but it flies for a long time. Racers, 5-inch freestyle builds, compromise on flight times. You merely get 5 minutes, but they handle it great. And Cinewhoops basically are bad along all of these dimensions. The only advantage they have is they look non-threatening, they are safe because the props are reducted, and they have specific flight characteristics like sort of braking very easily, or how should I put it, stopping more easily, and not, usually quads, as soon as they move, they sort of move, and it's difficult to stop them without disrupting the video and tilting sort of backwards to have thrust going to the front. So these just kind of inherently start to slow down as soon as you level them. This is useful for making video, but apart from that, it's just horrible. And on top of that, the noise this thing is making is just awful. It's absolutely awful. It's incredibly loud. So I guess that's enough of a rant. Let's see if if I will still get Cinewhoops for review after this review. But honestly, I mean, I even declined a few that I should have gotten, because I'm just getting annoyed of reviewing them and saying the same thing over and over. I think maybe I should try the Kebab FPV Cinewhoop, because I know he's probably, I mean, I would trust him to make this work. Probably his Cinesplorer does perform differently, but everything I tried so far didn't. Alright guys, I hope you found this interesting, useful. Of course, everything I talked about, all these products are, as usual, linked in the product description below. Now, if you click on one of these links, of course, it helps my channel. It helps, supports me to keep on doing what I'm doing. And obviously, it's just enough to go through these links. You don't need to buy the specific product that is linked. So if you want to do it, that's a good way to support without paying 1 extra cent. So thanks guys, thanks for watching. Bye bye.